So P dash 2. So in this section, we're going to be learning about all different type of inequalities. It's pretty much the same process, but now it's going to be an inequality instead of an equation. So think about this. If it's an equation, if I say x is equal to 3, it's exactly one solution because it's an equation. So one solution. But if I say x is less than 3 or greater than 3, it's not exactly one answer. Instead, we have multiple solutions that covers under that category. So inequality would always have multiple solutions, unlike equation has one solution. So like I'll start off with symbols. I know before we used to use, okay, so here's the open circle, we have closed circle. We used to graph the number line there. But now we have something different. We have different symbols. I hope you remember from pre-calculus class last year. So we used to use those parentheses and brackets here. So let's say here's my first example. If I have -3, 5 and bracket. So basically this parentheses, it tells you if it's open circle or not. So that's always going to be open circle. If I have bracket, it means it's the closed circle, which means it's included, all right? It's included within that interval. And now, based off this, like let's say the example I had before, I have -3 and 5. It means my inequality going to be x is less than and equal to +5 because it's something within -3 through 5. So -3 is the lower limit, 5 is the upper limit. So basically everything less than and equal. Why did I put equal? Because I see bracket by this number, by 5. And I see parentheses by -3. So it means, so it would be everything greater than -3. There's no equal sign. Why? Because it's a parentheses. That number itself is not included for that. Okay, for infinity, how do we deal with that? Normally for infinity, we just put parentheses, not a bracket. Why? Because infinity is always kind of like an uncertain number. We don't know exactly what number that is, so we just put parentheses for that. So that's what those symbols actually mean. Now let me show you a few examples like how to solve and how to actually put it into those brackets and parentheses. So let's say my first example is example number 5 on page number 18. So I have a -3 less than and equal to 6x minus 1 over 2 and less than 3. This is kind of like a double inequality. Normally we have like and or in the middle, but this is kind of combined everything, like embedded into one inequality. But idea is still the same. Whatever you do to one side, you got to do to all three sides. So first thing I need to isolate this variable, which is x here. So I would actually get rid of this number in the denominator first. So I would multiply by 2 in all three sides. So here's 2 is going to get canceled out. So on the left side, it's -6, less than and equal to 6x minus 1, less than, it's 6. Here you go. All right. Now, I would add 1 in all sides here. So I see -5, less than and equal to 6x. And I have less than 7. Lastly, I would just divide by 6 at the end. And finally, I know it's going to be, so 7 divided by 6, it's going to be something around 1. So 7 divided by 6 is 1.16. And greater than and equal to, I have 0.83, so -0.83. And lastly, if I ask you to graph it on the number line, okay, what we do is, so here's 0. So since -0.83 has a line under, so that's where you need a bracket. So I would say this is -1, so here's what, this is where it would be -8.3. This is what I need a bracket, which is going this way. Why? Because everything within this section is your answer. And everything less than 1.16, which is going to be here, so I would put a parentheses. And lastly, I would just shade the area in between these two. So that's how we shade at the end. So now let me go over absolute value inequality. So absolute value inequality. Okay, so I have x minus 5 and less than 2. So first step, okay, since it's absolute value, so again, just like normal equations, so you have to have positive and negative side of this function. So I would make that first. I have x minus 5 and it's less than 2. Remember, the positive side stays the same all the time. But what happens to negative side? I would keep the left-hand side as it is. But now you got to do two different things. You have to switch the sign along with making negative of the number. So you have to make this number negative and you gotta switch the sign. So you gotta do two different things. Switch the sign and change the sign of the number. And lastly, pretty much you just have to solve each one separately. I would add 5 both sides. It would be x is less than 7. That's my first one. And if I add 5 both sides, this is going to be x is greater than positive 3. And now if I ask you to graph, so less than 7, which is here, so it's going to be a parentheses and here, and this is 0 and 1 2 3, and it's greater than 3, it would be this, and shade within these two. Here you go. So that's how we graph absolute value inequalities. And now I just have a last example to show you, and that's going to be all for the day. Okay, so I have quadratic inequalities. How do we solve quadratic inequalities? Quadratic inequality, so let's say I have x squared minus x minus 6 and it's less than 0. First of all, just solve this inequality like normal equation. Forget about that it's less than or greater than. Just take it like normal equation. So I'm just going to rewrite this first. So I'm going to rewrite it because it's easier to solve an equation first. So I'm going to write it as an equation. Okay. Why? Because it's easier for me to factor it out, like factor out an equation instead of inequality. So once I factor out this equation, I have x plus 2, x minus 3, it's equal to 0. So my answer is going to be negative 2 and positive 3. Okay. But that's not all. Now, switch it back to inequalities because that's going to be my actual solution for this problem. It's not an equation originally. It's an inequality. So bring back the inequality sign. Okay, but you can't. I know some people might just they're going to say, oh, let's just take this sign and then just put it here. No, that's not how we do it. So I have two solutions, negative 2 and 3. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw these solutions on the number line here. I have negative 2 and positive 3. Okay, now, if you look closely, basically what I have is I have 3 different sections on my number line. So something that goes from negative infinity to negative 2. Something that goes in between negative 2 and 3. And something that goes from 3 to positive infinity. I have 3 different sections on my number line, which going to be my potential solutions for this problem. But which one is the right answer? That's what we need to check. This is where we take testing intervals. How do we test? Okay, so basically I'll show you a shortcut, but let me actually show you a long way first. So you have to take a testing point from each interval, plug it into the inequality, see which one works. I'm going to start off with the easiest one. I know 0 is the easiest one. 0 as my testing point. So I'm going to take it to my original equation, which is I have x squared minus x minus 6 is less than 0. Let's plug in 0. If I plug 0 for here, 0 and minus 6 less than 0. So negative 6 is less than 0. Is that true? Yep, it is true. A negative number is always less than a positive number. So that is my answer here. So technically, I know for sure this piece is definitely going to be a solution. Now, here's the thing. You don't have to do the rest of those. Why? Because on the number line, every other solution part going to be or section going to be your answer. Like here, let me give you an example. Let's say you already have 3 sections. And you already know this part is your answer. You already plugged in the number and that works. So you already know that section definitely going to be your solution, right? So now here's the shortcut. The section next to that never ever going to be your answer. So you can just cross it out. And a section next to that will definitely going to be your second part. So basically every other section on the number line going to be your solution. So let me take you back to this graph. Since we already know this is my answer here. So there's no way the other 2 pieces going to be your solution. All right, because those sections are next to that. It's not going to happen. So since you already figured out the middle section is your answer, so I'm not going to test out the rest of those sections because I already know the middle part is already my answer. All right, because every other thing. Lastly, what you have to do is you have to write the interval notation for your answer. So it's going to be from -2 to 3. And then parentheses. Why? Because the original problem has parentheses.
Getting into one of our Zoom and they